Alright, so Atmos is off, so no cheesy effects going on at all. And I'm going to be setting the audio through my Bluetooth. That way, I could be sure that, I have a control situation where it has no Atmos applied. And I want to just show the difference between how things sound now and where the Atmos is actually getting. Or basically, stereo is being stripped of its spatial cues and being repackaged and sold back to us, which is like ridiculous. But like, it kind of came at a good time because a lot of people think that stereo is not surround sound. When they understand, concepts like the Vanishing Speaker Act and the Phantom Center, and the only reason why we have, the vanishing, like, when you have a good set of speakers and it's vanishing, you have it calibrated so you have the vanishing act happening. The singer sounds like she's in the center of the room or he's in the center of the room, and the drummer sounds behind them. They sound kind of like they're behind and receded about, a good, like 5 feet, depending on the recording, right? And it creates kind of like an arc around you is what is the general belief, like this semi-sphere in front of you. And the reason why it doesn't sound so much like it happens behind you is because you don't get the full sound recordings from the stereo sound from any source behind you. When a cross-array mic recording is made, you get the direct sound and you get the reflected sound. So when speakers are made, ideally they're made so that the directed sound reaches the ears first, so you get the left and right localization, and then you get, also if they were very ideally made, the port would actually be able to reproduce the out of phase sound in such a way to add spaciousness. Because unlike a subwoofer, the frequencies inside of a set of mains is actually, hey, come on, hush. The speaker inside of a set of mains is actually smaller than a subwoofer. So it can actually simulate pretty much like a little mini cathedral setup or acoustics. So I'll start the sound right now. Hey, come on, hush. He's 3D too. Hush. Here, let me, where did the recording go? There we go. Alright, so basically, this is, I got something going on that I've been playing with called dark noise, which is a way of overriding the sound of the room essentially, and bringing back the sound of the actual, like the sound you would hear all around you in the club, which is actually really the source of omnidirectional, stereophonic sound. So when you are able to locate, not just lefting, it's like when you listen to a singer on stage, they're all performers on stage, they're all technically monophonic, or a person singing in a tonal, they're all monophonic, but you can still, figure out how far they are from you. You can still figure out where they're even moving as they're walking around and dancing or something, because you are able to hear them, and then you'll hear a trailing resonance from the ambience, right? So that is the out of phase sound that is always captured in the cross-array mic array anyway. So I actually have the dark, I call it dark sound, like dark noise, because there's no such thing as silence in sound. So it's basically like the lowest volume you can have, the blackest, when everything are supposed to be silent, but it's still coming out of your speaker. I call it dark noise because it's still on phase and it's still in context of the sound. So I'm gonna turn it off and on. So I'm gonna do I'm actually gonna do what's it called in binaural recording, so that way it'll be a lot easier to hear. But for now, this switch is kind of not really very practical, so I'm just gonna like bring it. So I'll do this when it's on, and this when it's off. So it's on right now. So it's off right now, and that's how 3D it already sounds. We're listening to an Atmos demonstration using stereo speakers, and it already sounds this 3D. So I'm gonna add my dark box. Right now.
This is Dolby Cinema. It's where the most advanced cinematic technology you've ever experienced begins. This is Dolby Atmos. The number of speakers around you no longer matters, because this is the world's first object-based cinematic audio.
Plug in.
With powerful moving audio that transcends from channels to moving around you with pinpoint accuracy. Whether the soundscape fits the mood of the scene,
come on, you guys, let's go!
or captures the full extent
Plug it in.
of nature's fury. And remember this? It's just the beginning of Dolby Vision. Because what you thought was black
Plug in.
isn't. This is black. This is contrast that reveals details deeper than any image you've seen on a screen. This is luminance that means the difference between white and pure energy. Energy that is about to reveal an entire universe of color you've never experienced in the cinema.
Unplug. Plug. Plug. Unplug. Now I'm just gonna actually like take it on and off and on and off. Whoa, I actually have a serious problem there. I just noticed. I should probably move something. Find the right place. So I'm actually just gonna every second plug in and unplug it. I'm stopping now. We'll get on. exactly what you get with stereo. Anyway, that's what stereo means. That's why it's called stereo, like stereoscopic vision. That's why we have the word binaural. Okay, so I'm actually going to do a white versus pink noise test right now because I figured that would be a good way of demonstrating the. See, I have Atmos off, like, so it's not doing any sort of weird, like, you know, like it's any virtual surround type stuff it does. Signal generator. Noise. Okay, so I have to send this thing off to the Bluetooth as well, I think. No, it's there it is. Okay. So you can hear it a lot easier if I unplug it now. So that's what I call dark noise. And its role is essentially to be. So I had to create basically a omnidirectional. It's a speaker that can play up to 350 hertz. That sounds like it's unlocal. That sounds unlocalizable. So you can put it anywhere you want in the room, and it's able to cause a reflection across throughout your room that would hit you after the mains would get you. So you're listening to stereo plus a third speaker that's only meant to play what I call dark noise, which is pretty much like the out of phase signature. Sorry, the out of phase sound that has been in the mix ever since we started making stereo recordings. In fact, Dolby started the career using the technique of what every kid figures out when they plug in, like, you know, like their headphones halfway in, and you get the same thing, the sound of out of phase sound. It sounds kind of like you just like if you're listening through headphones and you put it sounds like you're in front, you know, in front and center, and you kind of unplug it halfway. Suddenly it sounds like you're sitting in the back corner of the club, and like the vocalist isn't as like loud. You hear more of the rumble, and you hear more of like a distant kind of whooshing sound, and sometimes it actually uncovers a lot of cool effects and sounds, and like you can hear like the secondary guitars and stuff like that a lot more clearly. So a lot of people use it to learn parts for music. But yeah, this is actually what that box does. It just plays from 350 hertz on down. But what's interesting is that it doesn't sound like it does. It actually sounds like it adds texture to everything else from wherever it begins all the way up. Like it's a canvas or something. So here's a pink noise demo. So yeah, basically it's just a way of making it so that the same way that we hear the Hafler effect or a void pipe would have it, so that the out of phase sound using that parabola it has ends up coming out sounding like the out of phase sound of the cross microarray that is capturing, and it comes out basically lagging behind what would be directly radiating into your ears. So you hear the localization of the sound around the room, and then you hear also right after it trailing this resonance that you hear just your ears kind of just get used to it. No matter how your room is set up, your ears will just kind of get used to the sound. Just like the way that no matter what venue you go to, you kind of just, you hear your favorite artist, you hear their voice. It doesn't change like the overall tonality of their voice that much. People do actually, do slapback test and then snap and test to see like, or they use PAs and stuff like that to make sure that they actually do stay on beat and play according to each other versus hearing the back wall. But yeah, it's essentially the same way as being in front or in the middle and then hearing the person in front of you singing, whether it's like Johnny Cash or Lady Cash, Arby, or whatever, and you would hear him directly, and then you would also hear the sound of his performance right after surround you, and that reinforces the sound of his 3D image. He is not two sources of sound panning left and right. That's not what stereo sound is. So a person playing guitar is not two speakers. It's not a person panning left and right. It's a person that is a singular sound source. Like some people call it like a single point sound source in the middle of a field, essentially, sound field, soundscape. And we call that ambience, right? It's like when a person sings like in a tunnel, for instance, they're using the tunnel to create an ambience. It creates a resonance, a reverb, and it kind of makes them sound like they have, it makes their voice sound fuller, and it amplifies their voice, the same way a port does, right? But it doesn't only amplify, just like I was saying before, when the frequencies are actually smaller than the actual port, it doesn't only give you a port boost, it also gives you spatial cues. And it also has the ability to actually make it sound better. Like, so a person singing inside of a tunnel actually sounds better because they get the reverb and the resonance, and they sound amplified, and they are able to, just sing as if they're using like an actual reverb or setup, even though it's all in analog. The tunnel is just a gigantic analog semi-tube, which therefore acts like a mirrored tube, which is a tube, and a tube carries sound, one to one, right? So when you're listening to him, no matter how far you are in the tunnel, you'll start hearing more and more of him the closer you get, and less of him the farther you get. But no matter what, you'll always hear the sound of the tunnel, and that's the difference. That's how you know how far you are away from him, and that's how you are able to localize him. It's not because he himself is two speakers or two sources of sound. So yeah, what is interesting now is that we're getting this situation here where, because of things like bows and basically speakers that don't do the vanishing act, like Bose did this thing where they realized that people use their kitchen stereos or their alarm clocks in ways where stereo doesn't really matter. So they just pretty much use like a two-way radio, flipped on its side, so that has a port and it has an actual woofer and a tweeter. So they found that one, stereo monitor just flips on its side, and then you put like a CD player in it or something like that, so it looks like a stereo speaker. Actually sounds better because you're just wandering around the room, so it sounds fine, right? And then they call that the waveguide room. They had a great TV commercial where it was like, wow, we learned how to compress the sound of a whole entire stadium into like a box, but that's just literally called having a port, or having, that's why speakers aren't open baffle. But that's also why speakers that are open baffle have to be placed somewhere towards the center of the room, around like the 2/5 area, so that you don't create standing waves. But people will swear that those sound more like real life sound than anything, but they're just really impractical, because you don't want to have something that just sits at the weird 2/5 mark of your room at all times, I guess. And usually they have to be really, really big, because it has to be able to block the front and back wave. So what cabinets do is they block the front and the back wave by completely sealing and isolating it. But then the cabinet itself has either a ported, usually they're ported, like or they use ABRs. But I personally prefer ported to me. So anyway, like the port is designed to fire off a sound that would be pretty much the out of phase sound and not disrupt the sound that is coming from the front, but add this kind of spaciousness while adding a mid-bass, not mid-bass, but like some sort of a bump anywhere between 50 hertz and 120 hertz sometimes, it just depends. And a lot of speakers don't do that at all, actually. A lot of speakers don't even use the port to boost the speaker, to boost the bass at all. They just use it to add spaciousness, which is what these speakers we're using right now are doing. These are the 2001 FEs, and they actually don't use the port for bass boosting. I could actually like completely cover the port, and it doesn't actually reduce the sound of the low end at all. In fact, here's the sound of the port, and here's the sound of the front. But yeah, so just look out for like how there seems to be a lot of stuff going on where they're taking away stuff that we already have that we don't notice, and then selling it back to us after we forget that we already had it. So it's like really weird. So like I've seen music where they actually take away the 3D spatial cues, and then they'll sell back the normal version as if it's like an Atmos mix or something like that, when it's literally just the same thing, but usually with the out of phase mix, what I call dark noise, kind of just like heightened up a bit more to exaggerate it a bit more. And that's why you have the Atmos button on like your phone, so you could like either exaggerate it or desaturate it, or just like remove it. But no matter what, when you get the Atmos version, you're getting just a normal stereophonic version, which already has the Hafler effect built in, or it has the out of phase sound, and it is already capable of doing what basically was foundation of Dolby to begin with, which was they just used the Hafler effect and put one speaker usually behind you and filled in the surround sound scape of your room by balancing it out. Because the only reason why we have the phantom center, and then people hear everybody hear the guitars actually to the left of their left guitar, the singer in the middle with the drummer behind them, and it's all 3D, and you hear above you, like it's all 3D in front of you, but not so much behind you. Is just because all the sound is coming from the front of you. But if you take the same monophonic sound and put it behind you, then you end up completing the whole entire sound of the ambience, and it becomes even. So then your ears are able to localize all the sound in complete 3D spatial sound above and below you. Not usually below you, don't usually use that as often, but yeah, with the use of just two speakers that are actually properly, aimed at you. Like you have to actually lock them in. It's just like with stereophonic, like movies, you can't have the TV crooked, you can't have the glasses crooked, you can't have one TV, you can't have the screen where it's tilted backward, like one side. the speakers should actually be, optimized in their position. They should be pointed, like toed back, raked in like the same angle, and matched to the same seriousness as would take stereo 3D to snap into focus. And what's interesting is if you go back and grab your Nintendo 3DS, that thing actually had 3D sound, just using 2 speakers. And if you remember how it worked, you had to actually put your eyes like, in the center of the screen properly, so it would actually snap into 3D. And they used that to allow for it to actually play 3D spatial sound to the point where you can play it all 3 at a time and hear like all the Zelda uses a lot of spatial cues to solve riddles and stuff like that, or just to evade like the rolling rock, for instance. Like, is the rolling rock coming from behind you? Is it coming from in front of you? Is it going to turn the corner? Wherever. It is all based off of spatial sound, right? So basically, Nintendo dropped Dolby after N64 because they needed to rely on a fully symmetrical surround sound that wouldn't be able to be something that another company could take away. And so now their sound is actually lossless, 6-channel PCM, but it's scalable to the point where you could just use 2 speakers and it just plays it all, and it will sound 3D. I play Nintendo, like Switch, I play Tears of the Kingdom all the time using just 2 speakers, and it actually is just as seamless in its 3D as when I use my Atmos setup, which is a full matching, like voice combo matching setup where I got 2 subs that are literally like, everything is literally like voice combo matched very carefully. And like, it took me like months to calibrate, and I have like a before and after video of it and everything. But like, the idea of 2 speakers being stereo, if you look back into the history of it, they call it the sound of real life. Because stereo in Greek actually means solid. Just like your eyes triangulate vision, and it sees a solid object. But it only sees a solid object based off of the context of where you're seeing that solid object. You can still see with one eye, and you can still see like the person, like whether he's growing at you, whether he's growing or coming at you, but just not as well as with the triangulation of two eyes. Just like with your ears, you triangulate with your ears, and you could hear behind you perfectly fine. If someone was like walking around you, you wouldn't have to move a muscle to track them moving around you, and if they called up above you, you'd actually hear them above you too, and you wouldn't have to move a muscle. So your ears are actually better at tracking objects than your eyes are, and they're constantly on, and they're just very evolved at actually being fully aware of 3D spatial sounds. That's why your ears are the only ones capable of like locking into just one thing, like so well. Like you can listen to like one instrument throughout an entire song, and then just listen to just only the hi-hat for an entire song, and then listen to only the vocalist for the entire song. Yeah, like when you don't have to move a single muscle. Whereas your eyes, you have to look around to see what's going on. So your ears are capable of hearing 3D sound without the need for anything other than a reversal of the cross mic array configuration that we've always had. Because the cross mic array configuration we've always had has always recorded directionally as a V shape that would then also record the background sound as the out-of-phase audio. And then what's essentially happening when you have 2 speakers is that process is happening in reverse. It's as if the cross mic array is blasting the walls with out-of-phase sound, and then the front 2 mics that are crossed are firing beams of sound at your speakers and reproducing basically what you would have heard if you were standing in the same place. But instead of doing that, that would be impractical because you have to be there. We use AC. We send the sound through the back of the speakers, and it does the same thing. But you still hear the out of phase sound in the recording, and that's how you're able to get things like the vanishing act. That's why mains, when you have your stereo sound well done, you can actually hear like the space between the singer. You hear the size of the singer, you hear the distance they are from you, and the space between them and the guitarist and the drummer on all dimensions. Like usually everyone recommends that, like, if you have it right, that the music should be behind your speakers, and I found that to be usually true. But the whole concept of the phantom image, the phantom center image, where you could actually hear like a voice floating in the middle, no matter what, is the reproduction of 3D stereo sound. It's just biased towards the front of the room because that's where the speakers are. And you can actually restore the full 3D sound if you wanted to, using the Hassler effect or using other effects. I'm working on something on the this is like the 5th rendition of my Dark Noise box. If you want me to link like the 5 videos that I did. But what's really funny is that Nintendo is now using the same technique, and I was like really shocked to see them do it. Like they're actually using the same like concept as what I was working on, and so like it's pretty cool. So now the new Nintendo actually is able to play 3D sound in handheld mode, whereas the original Nintendo Switch didn't have the capability of playing 3D sound. And I'm thinking it just had to do with like saving on processing, because people don't realize how much sound actually matters. So when they were complaining about like Bluetooth and stuff like that, Nintendo takes sound so seriously. And if you're playing Breath of the Wild right now, like I could jump from the sky, and like right when I hit the first blade of grass, I instinctively hover, just from sound alone. I'm like Pavlovianized to just hover, so that it looks like I just fell from the ground and just barely, and I just landed like Batman or something like that, barely pulling out anything. And that's because you could actually hear him approaching the ground. You literally hear a speaker approaching the ground. You can even do weird things like zoom link up, so you're seeing him from the top down like a board game, and have him whistle and hear a link that's wall loaded. So his whistle will sound, actually, if you're on like a flat plane, his whistle will sound like it's actually like you put Link on the wall and he's whistling, and the sound is coming up at you because he's wall loaded at a area of low pressure. But besides that, yeah, in the handheld mode and when you plug it in like TV, you could actually hear sound in 360, whether in stereo or in handheld mode. And the trick is, if you've been following my mid-bass module / Dark Noise series, is the same exact trick. And it's actually really cool to start using it, because I was actually like begging companies to like just do it, just add that as a feature at least, because who the hell uses Dolby upmixing? And adding that as a feature would just be so much better, and everyone would use it and benefit from it, and also everyone would understand that 3D, that stereo sound is supposed to be 3D. And that's pretty much the whole point of the video, to remind you that that stereo sound has always been stereo. Keyword stereo, like stereophonic, stereovision, stereophonic, stereo sound. Not binaural, not biphonic. stereo. Because the word stereo just actually just means solid, as in holographic in New Age terms. So if they keep taking away the out of phase sound and planning everything to just left to right panning, it's gonna be really lame, because they're just selling us back technology that we literally had back in the 1920s and you can just make at home. And it's really infuriating because this is so many times that they just take advantage of people, like whenever people don't understand like what something is. It's just like the way Bose realized that people wandering around the kitchen don't need an actual, like, don't need two stereo speakers on a boombox. So they just had it so that you'd have a tweeter and a full range and a waveguide. So they had a two-way bookshelf on its side, and if you're wandering around listening to nothing, it actually does sound fuller and better than two little dinky speakers on a boombox that would have to make sure that they were about the same size and has the same timbre, and would try to produce a stereophonic image while being like this portable box thingy, and usually terribly, pretty much impossible for it to actually produce that. Like, for it to actually have its stereo sound be, its stereo speakers be aimed appropriately or set up correctly. So then they start adding things like pseudo stereo, which is again like just pretty much doing what Ammo's doing, which is where they're just like amplifying like the Hafler effect essentially. And so then people started just thinking that stereo is just panning left and right. It's really weird. And then you had people like get into home theater audio, where like 80% of the sound comes, because movies are actually in mono. The front two speakers are actually used in movies as front surrounds, and then the back two speakers are back surrounds. And because it's set up for a movie theater, and in a movie theater they just buy the same JBL speaker in bulk and they just put it everywhere because it's cheap and easy to just put the same speaker everywhere, and they have a whole bunch of rows, so they're gonna do that. But in like a regular household seating, two speakers is plenty well enough for like one couch, and it will sound 3D if you actually get it to sound right. And if they remove the 3D and force you to buy it, you should probably be pretty angry about that, because that's kind of like a direction we're heading. Like, what, are they gonna have us subscribe to 3D sound next? So anyway, I don't know if that was a rant, but I was trying to be informative as much as I could be. But I'll write a piece that is more contextual about this, because I wrote a piece earlier that was about stereo and how stereo actually works, and how stereo has nothing to do with two speakers. Stereo has, like, just like I explained before, a singer inside like a metro station is not two sources of sound panning back and forth. He is a person singing or playing guitar, and then the ambience around him is what follows, and that's what makes him sound 3D. That has nothing to do with that. That's you having two ears. That's what makes stereo sound happen. You having two ears and the timing of your brain producing, or I guess basically producing like a representational model of the sound that you're actually hearing, so that you understand that the person is of this distance at this angle from you. But anyway, thanks for listening, and save stereo 3D spatial surround, and play Nintendo Switch. Get a new OLED, I guess, because it is really cool at 3D spatial stereo surround, or pull out your old 3DS and play the new remaster of Ocarina of Time, and just listen to the rocks going around you. Play Metro Prime, open the door, stop, and listen to the door shut behind you. Spin around, it's all the sound is completely symmetrical, and that's why Nintendo had to drop Dolby, was because they needed a reliable platform that they could just be sure would always be able to be used, like just in, I don't want to ruin it, but in Tears of the Kingdom, they use sound everywhere, and even in missions you have to follow a sound, just like in another game where you have to follow a sound, otherwise you get lost in a certain woods. So yeah, anyway, thanks.